Has anyone ever told you to take a chill pill? Have you wondered where to get one? Do you have difficulty sleeping, sometimes feel overstressed or even lose your temper? Diaphragm breathing is the solution. This is the most effective and simple, natural way to create relaxation in your body. When we perceive a threat, when something threatens our sense of safety, generally if it's something from the outside, maybe a tiger running towards us, then our body's going to respond with a fight or flight system. Most people have heard of that. But oftentimes it's the mental tigers that are actually going to trigger off that fight or flight system. So I'll explain how the nervous system generally is divided into our voluntary nervous system and our involuntary, our automatic nervous system. And within the automatic nervous system, we've got the sympathetic, which is that fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic, which is the relaxation response. So like an accelerator and a brake on the car, they have different functions, but unlike a car, you can only one is going to work and the other one won't be working. So when the sympathetic nervous system's on, when there's a threat and our body's responding to that with fight or flight system, then it's not relaxed. So to turn off that fight or flight system and turn on the relaxation response, diaphragm breathing is the particular key. Now the reason why the diaphragm breathing works is because the vagus nerve is threaded through the diaphragm and connects with the heart rate centre and also with the amygdala. Now this nerve connects these three parts of our body so that it can coordinate the survival responses, the survival reaction to the perceived threat. So when there's if we see a tiger coming down the street, and we don't need to understand and analyse the tiger, we just need to run or flight or fight or just freeze and blend into the background. So this response is controlled by the amygdala. So there's a small part of the brain in the brainstem, in our survival part of our brain, called the amygdala. And that is the stimulus that gets stimulated by that perceived threat, and then that triggers off a whole cascade of responses. It's the adrenaline, a bunch of hormones that shift the blood flow, shifts the blood from our belly, where we do our sort of vegetative digestion and so forth, moves it down into the big muscles, into our legs, so that we can run, and also it can come up into the upper part of our body, where it can build the energy and the blood and the oxygen for our fight response, and also for aggressive and activity with our speech and with our expression. So with this blood flow change, the heart rate increases to pump the blood around to these muscles that are needed for that survival behaviour, and also the blood flow changes in our brain. So there's a little bit of blood moves from our frontal lobes, where we do our clear adult thinking, and it concentrates in the brainstem, which is going to manage that survival behaviour. So when the stress response is on, and we've got this fight response, for example, and we've lost our temper, most people can kind of recognise the experience that they can end up saying things that afterwards, when they cool down, they think, I can't believe I said that. And that's because we're kind of temporarily insane at that point. The adult mind's checked out a little bit, it's a bit of disadvantage because there's not as much blood there. And then our survival mind takes over, and that's when all this sort of fight words come out. So that kind of explains why, when we lose our temper, we can actually speak in really bad ways. So it's important to kind of understand this biology that's going on with the stress response, because it helps us to understand that what our body's trying to achieve, and actually what we actually need to do at that time. What we need to do is we need to relax, we need to cool the body down, we need to turn off the sympathetic and turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxation response. So the most effective way to do that is, as I say, with diaphragm breathing. So coming back to our respiratory system, our breathing system is controlled by both the voluntary and the involuntary nervous system. It's on automatic, we don't have to pay attention to our breathing most of the time, it just runs on automatic. But at any instant we can override that and intentionally breathe. So there's three ways that we breathe. We expand our chest cavity by raising our shoulders. You can feel, if you do that, you can feel a little bit of air go through our nose, and that kind of explains mechanically when we draw up our bones, it opens up the upper lobes of the lungs. That's partly explains and gives you a demonstration of how that works. We often breathe with our ribs, so we expand our chest cavity, creates a vacuum, and then the air gets sucked in, and then we contract our ribs and the air leaves. But the way that we also breathe, and what is most important for relaxation, is with the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is this muscle that attaches around the base of our ribs. And it's like the floor of the chest cavity. It generally hangs in this concave position because of the negative air pressure in the lungs. So when we contract this muscle, it comes down flat and it draws open the bottom lobes of the lungs and draws that air into the bottom lobes of the lungs. And while it's doing that, it displaces the belly forward. So diaphragm breathing is like belly breathing. So on the inhale, the diaphragm comes flat and the belly expands. On the exhale, diaphragm relaxes and the belly contracts. So diaphragm breathing, we know it as belly breathing because we can't actually feel the diaphragm, but by belly breathing, we're voluntarily controlling this diaphragm. So the diaphragm in Chinese medicine, interestingly, is called the emotional storehouse. And I've noticed this with people, particularly with panic disorder. Often the diaphragm's actually in a spasm, or it's breathing, it's trained the wrong way. So they'll inhale and the belly will suck up, and they exhale, and they've really got this, badly trained diaphragm. So learning how to operate the diaphragm consciously and get it working in this natural way enables the nervous system to function smoothly again, to be able to move from the sympathetic, the stress response, back to the parasympathetic, the relaxation response. So coming back to this the vagus nerve, which is connected through the diaphragm, and it has a direct connection to that heart rate centre and also to that amygdala in the brain. So when we're voluntarily operating this diaphragm, with our inhale, the diaphragm's moving, exhale, it releases and expands, we're stimulating that vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve is also then sending a signal up to that amygdala, the alarm centre, and sending a signal that's communicating, I'm breathing easily, therefore the threat's over. As we often know, when there's a threat or a drama's going on, a big stress mess, and then once it's sorted out, we just take a sigh of relief. This is using the same principle, but starting off with that sigh, starting off with that diaphragm breathing to send that signal, I'm breathing easily, therefore the threat's over. So these days, most of the threats are not the real tigers that are coming from outside, but they're the mental tigers, like, oh my God, I'm late, or I haven't put my tax return in. So these stresses, these mental stresses that are coming in, but our body's still responding in this physical way, which is really, it's going to shorten our life, it's bad for our health, it disturbs our sleep, creates all sorts of problems, including reducing the telomeres on our DNA. So being able to do this diaphragm breathing is an important life technique. And I've had quite a few clients in their 50s and 60s that say, oh, I wish I'd learnt this when I was at school. What a difference it makes to people who've had chronic anxiety and chronic sleeplessness for can be many years. But learning this technique is actually, as I've explained, this mechanical way and this physiological way, how it actually controls your autonomic nervous system, your automatic nervous system. Now, the other way it works on a cognitive way is that it's an attention distraction. So instead of keeping our attention on those mental tigers, we're actually placing our attention on our belly. So this is a mindfulness practice. It's one of the most common mindfulness practices, is to pay attention to our breathing. If you're paying attention to diaphragm breathing, then you're going to get all the physiological benefits as well. So by placing our attention on this diaphragm breathing, on this belly breathing, we're learning to strengthen our attention placement, and that gives us more mindfulness strength to then be more intentionally focused with many other aspects of our life. So when we are experiencing some mental tiger, noticing that tension building up in our body, then we've got now a technique. We can bring our attention to our belly, we can do some diaphragm breathing, and the mental tigers will start to fade away. And when we can be relaxed, and then we can get the best blood flow into our frontal lobes, and then we can do the right problem solving that we need to do. Because there's often, various things we do have to get through the traffic or whatever it is. But we can bring our best thinking to those behaviours that we need to do. We can bring our best thinking to those conversations that need to be had. We can bring our best thinking to understanding interpersonal relationships when we can keep our regulation of this stress response. So this technique, which I call the chill pill, is practicing this diaphragm breathing 3 times a day for 21 breaths at a time. It takes about 3 minutes. It's not that difficult to do. Once you get that experience of being able to actually move your belly, and you know that you're doing it right, then the attention practice happens by bringing your attention back to that breath and doing it for about 21 breaths at a time. So 3 times a day. And think of it as a skill building. Just practice it for 3 times a day for most of the next 7 days. And that'll give you an enhanced muscle memory of this skill, and also it'll give you the experience of the relaxing benefits that it brings. And then the next time when that mental tiger comes in, you'll have something that you can effectively respond to it in a way that's going to work for you.
Action!